If you've just joined us, you tuned into the South African Morning Weekend edition, and President Cyril Ramaphosa is concerned about the increasing numbers of coups on the continent. He was speaking to African leaders at the meeting of the African Union's African Peer Review Mechanism. Ramaphosa urged leaders to support the work of ECOWAS and the AU's Peace and Security Council to stop unconstitutional changes of government. Let's discuss some of the outcomes with Professor Eddy Maloka, the Chief Executive of the African Peer Review Mechanism. Prof, many thanks for your time this morning. And let's maybe start with some of the major discussion points that were unpacked at this particular meeting. You've heard me in my intro saying that the current unrest across parts of the country was at the top of the agenda.
Yes, good morning. Of course, it's a big issue. President Ramaphosa, in the opening session, he raised that issue, and also it was raised by a number of heads of states later, especially President Macky Sall of Senegal, that this issue of unconstitutional change of government, especially in the West, they are happening largely in West Africa. It's a concern. It's something that the African Union should look at. And I'm hopeful that something will happen in the near future. The African Union, we need to find a way, because there are clearly challenges with the kind of jurisprudence and the framework we have to respond to this problem.
That's a difficult one, Prof, because there's often been a lot of criticism about bodies like the African Union and their ability to intervene substantially in issues of distress in various parts of the continent. So when we're saying that we're hopeful that the African Union will be able to intervene, what exactly is it that we're talking about?
No, because the African Union is a multilateral organization. So, and it's more like an organization of sovereign states. And these sovereign states, they join voluntarily on the basis of the rules. They agree to be governed equally and in a fair manner by the same rules. And sometimes, like in the case of unconstitutional change of government, it's a deviation from the rules, because there is an African Union framework to deal with this unconstitutional instance of unconstitutional change of government. But clearly there are loopholes in that framework. And that's what we are talking about here, the African Union, to see how you can tighten up the loopholes to ensure that those loopholes are not being exploited by those who want to get to power through unconstitutional means.
With that, Prof, let's talk about the role of bodies in the different blocks. We've got the East African community, we've got SADC, and then we've got ECOWAS. The role that ECOWAS here can play when it comes to dealing with the various issues that are happening there, and perhaps more engagement with the different blocks on the continent in terms of approaching these situations as they develop. And I want to give you another example. Apart from the coups that are happening in West Africa, we've got what's happening in Mozambique, and a very difficult time dealing with that as SADC on our own.
Yeah, but the problem of Mozambique is substantially different from unconstitutional change, because unconstitutional change of government, it's where an establishment implodes, where a political establishment implodes, where elements of the military seize power and arrest a sitting president, dissolve parliament, suspend the constitution. Whereas in the case of Mozambique, it's an insurgency against the sitting government. And SADC has taken a view, and SADC has organized a regional response, and SADC, including South Africa, you know that SADC is deployed there. But as to the role of these regional bodies, ECOWAS, SADC, and you made also the example of the East African community, they have a different history, they had a different level of development. Some are strong in these areas, others are not. But ECOWAS, when it comes to response to peace and security situation, ECOWAS is one of our best actually on the continent, and has been very effective in Gambia and quite a number of instances. So ECOWAS has been able to demonstrate its strength. But when you look at the AU system, because ECOWAS is part of the African Union system. So in the African Union system, when you deal with regional conflicts, we use what we call the principle of subsidiarity. So the regional economic bloc that is closest to the conflict is the one that is the frontline responder to that matter. So in the case of these coups, it's ECOWAS and it's currently led by the president of Ghana. But then it works together with the entire peace and security architecture of the African Union. The Peace and Security Council is the legislative body, and then there are other mechanisms that are available to intervene, especially in terms of mediation. So I trust ECOWAS, and the weaknesses are not in ECOWAS and ECOWAS response. The weaknesses are in the jurisprudence that we have currently and some of the response measures. And you can see that they've been exploited. Like, for example, one of the key measures is sanctions. But you can see that those sanctions are not effective enough. So that's why people are able to say, well, I can get away with these sanctions. So they are not biting enough. So these are the discussions that are happening at the African Union to see how do you strengthen this response measure in such a way that it serves as a deterrence. At the moment, it's no longer a deterrence. But when it was introduced in 1999, at the Algiers Summit, the Algiers framework on unconstitutional, it served as a deterrence for a couple of years, probably for more than a decade plus maybe, but now you can see that some people have found a way around it.
Right, and then another important milestone that happened in this particular sitting, Prof, was the fact that Burundi joined the self-assessment group, the APRM, and I just want you to maybe elaborate on the importance of African states being a part of the self-assessment body, reflecting and being able to take accountability when things go wrong. How important is it to be part of this particular group?
For Burundi, it's a major milestone because you remember that Burundi was subjected to a number of issues in the past, and to some extent it was not fully a member of the community in some areas. And for Burundi to take this major step to be part of the APRM family, for me, I think it's a big achievement for Burundi and also for the APRM. When I went to see the president, he was surprised himself that I don't believe that in the whole of the Great Lakes region, we are the only country that's not a member. So for Burundi to have to accept this, it's also a demonstration of political will on the part of the leadership and the president in person that Burundi is ready to open itself to this assessment by APRM, because it's a very difficult thing. If you look at the reports that were presented yesterday on South Africa, on Nigeria, and of course on Namibia, they can be very harsh on a country. So it takes a lot of courage for leaders to open themselves and allow an external agency, African body, which is external to the country, coming in and conducting this review and writing it up, and then this document then is public. It's a very major step for the leadership. And the benefits of APRM is that you are able to take these recommendations and utilize them to improve. But also APRM, you also showcase your best practice. The president shared with us the best practice in Burundi, that Burundi has achieved self-sufficiency in the area of food security. So I think it's something that is quite good that Burundi will be able to share with other countries.
No, absolutely. And like you say, sometimes those reviews are very harsh, but it's important that African states try to implement those recommendations as best as they can. Professor, many thanks for your time this morning. I've been
Thank you very much and good day.
To Professor Eddy Maloka, who's the Chief Executive of the African Peer Review Mechanism.